Hey there, truth seekers. Welcome to episode 223 of the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith, where we refuse to panic when the text looks difficult and we refuse to settle for lazy answers when the Bible deserves better. Today's question comes from Numbers 10:31. If God led Israel by a cloud, then why was Hobab needed as a guide? Let me put that into everyday language. If God is guiding you, is it a lack of faith to still ask for directions? If you trust the Lord's leading, is it somehow less spiritual to use a map, a doctor, a counselor, a wise Christian friend? Because in Numbers language, the question is this: if you got a pillar of cloud and fire, what on earth do you need a Hobab for? Let's take a look at the text and the tension here. Exodus 13:21-22 tells us the Lord himself led Israel visibly by a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Numbers 9:15-23 repeats the pattern. When the cloud lifted, they moved. When it settled, they camped. This is supernatural, covenantal, unmistakable guidance. Then Numbers 10:31 says, where Moses says to Hobab, "You know the places in the wilderness where we should camp. Come, be our guide." So here's the tension. Why ask for a human guide when God is already leading? Is Moses hedging his bets? Is this a quiet vote of no confidence in the cloud? Let's take a look at an observation that helps solve the contradiction. Norman Geisler and Thomas Howe point out something critics regularly miss from the Big Book of Bible Difficulties. Moses sees no conflict. He talks about Hobab in verse 31 and the cloud in verse 34, 3 verses later, without the slightest hint of tension. For Moses, these go together, which tells you the problem is not in the text. It's in the false assumption that divine guidance and human wisdom cannot operate at the same time. Really, we're looking at two levels of guidance. The cloud handled the macro, when to move, when to stay, the overall direction, the visible presence of God. Hobab handled the micro, where the water was, where a massive camp could actually fit, which valleys flash flood, where the grazing was, which routes were safe for children and livestock. David Guzik says it perfectly. Israel did not need Hobab to tell them where to go. The pillar did that. They needed him to help them function wisely in the places God led them. That's not unbelief, that's leadership. And it's how God normally works. Let's make this into a modern analogy. This is the difference between GPS and a local who actually lives there. The GPS tells you, go to the city. The local tells you, don't take that exit at 5 p.m. unless you enjoy sitting in traffic, repenting of your life choices. The cloud said, this is where you're going. Hobab said, if you camp in that wadi and it rains in the mountains, you're going to wake up floating. That's not a lack of faith, that's survival. Or to put it another way, trusting God's guidance while ignoring practical wisdom is like praying for daily bread while refusing to go to the grocery store because you're waiting for manna to eventually hit aisle 5. So let's take a look at the biblical pattern. God promises the land. Israel still fights battles. God promises Paul safety. Paul still takes the Roman escort. God promises provision. Paul still says, if a man will not work, neither shall he eat. Faith and wisdom are not common enemies. They are partners. So when Moses says, be our guide, he is not replacing God's guidance. He's receiving one of the means God provided. Okay, I think that pretty much answers the question. We're going to pivot here because there's something really interesting in one of the study notes that I found, and we want to explore who was Hobab. All right, this is where the confusion comes in. Because the study notes in the HarperCollins New Revised Standard Version, yeah, it's been a while since we've had fun at the New Revised Standard Version's expense. The study notes claim Hobab is just another name for Ruel or Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. That sounds neat, and it's almost certainly incorrect. And this is a good moment to say something that my friends have heard me say before. Study Bibles are helpful, but the notes are not inspired. The text of the scripture is inerrant and infallible. The footnote was written by a guy with a deadline, and sometimes that deadline was 4:30 on a Friday. When the verse says, Hobab, son of Ruel, I'm going with Moses over the study note every single time, respectfully. Because if Hobab, Ruel, and Jethro are all the same person, then this man has more aliases than a spy movie, and the text never tells us why. The best reading is this: Ruel and Jethro both equal Moses' father-in-law. Hobab, that equals his son, which makes Hobab Moses' brother-in-law. Okay, the story doesn't end in Numbers, though. And this is where it gets beautiful, because the Bible does not leave this as a loose end. Judges 1:16 tells us the Kenites, the descendants of Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah into the wilderness and settled in the land. They didn't just visit. They inherited space among the covenant people. Judges 4:11 then speaks of Heber, the Kenite, a descendant of Hobab. So now we have the full picture. In Numbers 10, Moses says, "Come with us and we will treat you well." And Judges tells us they came, they stayed, they lived in the land. Hobab isn't just a wilderness guide. His family becomes permanently attached to the covenant people of God. So he doesn't just help them find water. His family ends up with real estate in the Promised Land. And if the name Kenites sounds familiar, it should, because one of the most dramatic victories in Judges, the defeat of Sisera, happens in the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Let's just say Sisera learned the hard way that you should never fall asleep in someone else's tent when they own both a hammer and a tent peg. Spoiler alert, that nap does not end well. That Midianite family Moses invited into the journey ends up participating in one of Israel's great deliverance stories. That's what happens when someone says yes to "come with us and we will do you good." So the application for us today begins with a question. Where are you trying to choose between trusting God and using wisdom? Where are you in saying, if I really had faith, I wouldn't need help? Some of you are waiting for a pillar of cloud while ignoring the Hobab God already sent, the counselor, the doctor, the seasoned believer, the wise friend, or even humble podcaster. Wanting the miraculous while rejecting the practical is not deeper faith. In Numbers 10, it's bad wilderness strategy. So, in conclusion, can God lead by a cloud and still use Hobab? Not only can he, that is his normal way of working. The cloud still leads, and in his kindness, God still sends Hobabs. So when you say yes to the Hobabs God places in your life, when you walk with his people instead of staying on the outside looking in, you're not just getting better directions for the wilderness, you're stepping into a story that leads to inheritance. Because in the Bible, the people who travel with the covenant people end up sharing in the covenant blessing. Just ask the Kenites. Follow the cloud. Invite Hobab. If this kind of careful, context-driven Bible study is sharpening your faith, you can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/Lance Smith. It's always appreciated. It's never expected. Next Friday, we're going to look at Numbers 10:33. Was the ark placed in the middle of the camp or in front of it? You can find every episode at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com Email me at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com or join the discussion on Facebook. Thanks for listening. Thanks for studying. Thanks for refusing to settle for surface-level answers. I'm Lance Smith, wishing you good health, good study, and God's richest blessings. So long, everybody.